The next chapter, the limousine drive. Benson was an astounding 300 pounds, with a light dark skin, if you know what I mean. He always possessed a smile that resembled that of one character from American Idol, the big guy. What what was his name? Oh yeah, Ruben, maybe. Benson was usually a big teddy bear and was always cheerful, but not today. When Darlin made it to the last step, she finally locked eyes with Benson and knew from his look that her mother had let her down again. "Good afternoon, Miss Darlin," Benson greeted her. "Where's my mom? She's supposed to be here," Darlin said in an upset tone. Her beautiful smile was all but a distant memory. Benson replied with a slight stutter. D- d- don't you be getting mad at me, miss. Your mother called and said that she wasn't going to be at the airport. She also said I was to take you directly to... Hey, easy with the bags, Darlin snarled at the dorm keeper, interrupting poor Benson. Sorry, miss. I apologize. Apologized her dorm keeper. Her name was Vladimir, and she had felt Darlin's scorn before. She did not bother making any excuses. She just continued carefully putting Darlin's Gucci bags in the trunk and took off back into the school without interrupting the obviously upset Darlin. Darlin and Disco jumped into the now open door of the limousine without saying any more. Benson closed the door after her and closed the trunk. The whole time worrying whether or not Darlin was going to have an episode. A few seconds later, he started the vehicle and without wasting any time, pulled away without even saying which way they were going. Darlin, already on the phone trying to get a hold of her mother, was getting nothing but voicemail. Benson cringed as she lowered the privacy window dividing the driver from the back of the limo. Darlin, now clearly angry by the tone of her voice. "What did she tell you? I can't get a hold of her." "I tried to tell you, Miss Darlin, before we left," replied Benson. "Well," Darlin said, uttering her hand. "All she said was that she couldn't make it to the airport and that I was to take you to your grandmother's." With an even bigger cringe that he was no longer on his face, but also in his voice. Darlin, now fuming, started pounding her fists on the white leather seats. Disco jumped into the front of the limousine with Benson. Disco had been around for a few years and knew Darlin very well. It's just best to stay away when she was having a tantrum. Disco was a very dainty little dog. "My grandmother's house," Darlin thought as she frantically tried to calling her mother again and again. Darlin despised her grandmother. Darlin's grandmother was a cold and calculated bitch. Not once had Darlin ever seen her show emotion. To Darlin, she was scarier than the old woman that gave the apple to Snow White in a Disney film. Darlin always felt that the lady had despised her. She could not even recall the lady smile ever. Along with her grandmother being the richest woman in the world, the lady certainly got Darlin's vote as the most eccentric. Everything about this lady was weirded out Darlin. It wasn't just the fact that she was an old lady and lived in the only known castle in North America. There was also the fact that the lady liked to surround herself with an abundance of midgets. To Darlin, the girl, to Darlin, a girl of, well, soon to be 16, thought that her behavior was social suicide. To top it off, Grandma always seems to be dressed in the same black dress, never changing her outfit. It was resembled one of those petticoats from Gone with the Wind movie. This made her look like she had no feet. Darling can remember thinking to herself, I wonder if she does have feet. The way she glides around. It had a tight corset from the style that went out during the Civil War, too. Oh no, what was it? What is. Wait, oh no, was this it? Darlin thought, suspending her sweet 16 with her grandmother and a bunch of dwarfs was not at all what she was hoping for. All this to Darlin didn't equal a sweet 16 at all. She found herself dialing the phone again and again. Somehow she thought if she took the time to dial, maybe she would actually take the time to answer. So she did. No answer. She barked, no answer, then tossed the phone onto the seat in front of her. Her mother had let her down once again, but this time, no gift, no excuse, no anything to ease the pain. Almost in tears, Darlin suddenly came up with a bright idea. Benson, turn the car around. I still might be able to catch up with Winter and Kaylee. I know Darlin was cut off by Benson. Oh no, Miss Darlin. I got to do a job and I'm going to do that job. You're not going anywhere. Have you ever been to your grandmother's house? Have you ever been to my grandmother's house? Asked Darlin, emphasizing the word bean. No, but I've seen it on the History Channel, replied Benson, with excitement in his voice. Well, it's not exactly the kind of place where I'd like to spend my 16th birthday. The place is P-Junk. Benson, with a truly sad voice, replied, I'm sorry, Miss Darlin. I got to do this job. Darlin internally admitted her defeat, then rested her head back on the seat. Even though her grandmother was less than 1 hour away from St. Mary's, Darlin had still not been there since she was transferred to St. Mary's. In fact, she hadn't been there since she was a kid. Her father was still alive back then. Sure, she seen her grandmother at the usual family functions, Easter and Christmas, which were always hosted by Darlin's mother at the mansion in Beverly Hills. Darlin could only remember being at the castle once before. The only faint memory she had was her getting into trouble. Only 5 years old at the time, Darlin can remember wandering off into the castle and feeling very terrified and lost. As Darlin sat in the limo, the memory was now weighing heavy on her mind. The more Darlin thought about it, the more she thought she could remember. She started to recall the 11-year-old memory more vivid than ever. Darlin could remember that there was a giant globe-like structure covered with a red satin sheet. Suddenly she remembered as if someone had just reminded her. It was that globe-looking thing that had scared the heck out of her. When she had peeked under it, she seen faces, and they were all calling out to her, "Help! Help, Darlin, help!" As she tried more to remember, she recalled being found by her mom. This soothed her as she remembered being coddled for the rest of that day by her father, who had died shortly after that in a car accident. The horrible memory went from being scared as a 5-year-old to the last times of being in her dad's arms. That was it, she thought, was the last memory she ever had of her seeing her father. As the limousine broke out of the city limits and began to pick up speed, Darlin rolled down the window to smell the country air. She could not quite put her finger on it, but for some reason the fresh air of the country made her feel at home. Perhaps it was the fact that she had always lived in urban centers, but she just loved it. Having spent not much time in the country lately made the air seem like a nice treat. As Darlin took the country air, her anger seemed to be soothed away. She soon found herself with a sunroof open, standing at waist level, facing backwards to avoid the wind blowing directly in her face. She could feel the warm country air blowing through her pigtails as she tried lifting her arms up to fight the wind, but it was too strong. It was just like you've seen in all the movies 1,000 times. Some person standing outside of a limousine, embracing the wind. The feeling complete and utter peace came over her. The funny thing is, for a moment she had forgotten her mother had let her down and where she was actually going. She was happy. As the limousine slowed down and began to turn a corner, she opened her eyes to see where they were. To her left, about 700 yards from the road, was Grandma's house. Immediately after turning the corner, the limousine pulled up to the outermost gate of the grounds. Darlin now turned around, facing forward, still standing in the sunroof, began to frown. In the middle of the black metal front gate, Darlin could see a little round hole. A man peeked out, then shut it closed. The little peek opened the peek hole, then shut it closed. A few seconds later, the black gates began to retract slowly. These were scary gates. The first 300 yards or so through the gate was kind of creepy, to say the least. On either side of the driveway stood several rows of ancient grapevines that had long since died, leaving what looked to be petrified remains of thorn bushes. Every row was all dried up, with no hopes of bearing any grapes ever again. The dark gray vines that used to grow grapes were looked like they were some kind of hybrid crossed with a rose bush. Darlin had never seen vines like this before. The fact that these dead vines of never-ending thorns even existed on someone's front lawn was more evidence that her grandmother was an eccentric, creepy old lady, thought Darlin. The entire driveway, all 700 yards of it, was paved with some type of white quartz bricks that reflected the most peculiar shine when the sun hit them at certain angles. It seemed to shimmer in the sun and almost blind you from time to time. Now, in complete awe, Darlin stood staring directly ahead at her grandmother's house, which was a real-life castle. Her, I don't even know what that word is, was immediately replaced with a reoccurring memory of her childhood experience. Oh, her serenity was immediately replaced with the recurring memory of the childhood experience as she looked at the castle. As the limo slowly proceeded down the driveway, Darlin could see little people doing yard work. When I say little people, I do mean little people. These were midgets. They were all looking very curiously at Darlin as she drove by, nudging one another to take a look. Darlin muttered to herself, "She is so weird," as she tried not to make eye contact with any one of the little people. Now just give it Now, to just give you an idea of the magnitude of this castle, this was this castle was one of the top 10 largest castles in the world. It was in the Guinness Book of World Records of being the only one built within the last century. Just beyond the skeletons of the ancient vineyard, they came up to the castle, the castle's protective outer wall, a massive stone wall capable of fending off foreign attacks from any army from anywhere in Earth's past. Now, looking straight up at the outer wall, Darling could see that it was made up of 4 main turrets with a drawbridge directly in the center. The white driveway that they were driving on had ended at the drawbridge. The drawbridge was wooden and had a unique metal black bindings blackened with time. Metal bindings blackened with time. Sorry again, I apologize. Literally, I'm reading this with no periods, no commas, no. I'm just trying to figure it out. It's just... All right, so the drawbridge was a wooden and had unique metal bindings blackened with time. Underneath the already lowered drawbridge was a moat full of greenish moss on top. Darling was quickly reminded of the witch's castle from The Wizard of Oz and thought back to what her classmates laughing at her earlier in the day. Was she a psychic? She just found those shoes. Was her dream somehow foretelling that she was going to be coming here? She had read in the Wiccan handbook that some witches have the gift of foresight. She pondered this for a moment, then went back to taking in some of the eerie landscape of the castle. The outer wall stood at least 50 feet high, with the turrets reaching in excess of 75 feet. Each turret was about 10 meters in diameter and rose above the wall in the shape of a cereal bowl with stone teeth emerging out from the top of it. All the turrets were encased with tall, almost wizard's hat-shaped roofs and had a ball on top of them. I guess they were free energy turrets. From Darlin's angle, she could tell the turret was manned or lit with a luminous glow of fire burning inside each one. Looking down below the drawbridge, Darling could see the lifeless black moat. The black still water had the same depth of the black color as a pupil of someone's eye. This gave Darling the feeling that there was somehow someone was watching her. She never seen water like this before and wished that the green moss had grown over the entire moat. The outer wall was the entire castle. The outer wall and the entire castle was made from purchased and dismantled medieval castle her grandmother had somehow swindled from the People's Republic of Romania many, many, many years before in their time of need. The story goes that Greta Haywood had claimed to be of Romanian descent. She told the people of Romania that she was going to restore the greatness of Romania by purchasing the historical remains of their long since destroyed castle. Her intent was to move the castle to the west and restore it back to its original condition. Her motives were to remind the West that Romania, still a great nation, shall rise again as a great empire. The price she had offered cleared half of the country's deficit, and at the time, Romania was in real economic trouble. But they never thought that she was going to bring it to America. She kept that little secret until the contract was done. Each block of stone of the outer wall was roughly 2 feet by 4 feet, staggered and piled into bricks to enforce the sturdiness, somewhat like the pyramid structures, I guess. Growing out of the moat, reaching up over the turrets like creepy fingers, were ferocious looking vines with purple leaves of ivy. She didn't notice this at first, but she found it peculiar. As the limousine came to a slow halt just before the drawbridge, the two little people emerged from what one could only conclude as the creepiest little guard shack you could ever imagine. For this was not actually a shack, but a huge base of a hollowed out tree. The diameter of the tree was at least 20 feet. Although the tree was dead, it still had life, for it was also covered in that creepy purple vines that grew out of the moat, making the tree look like a whole new species of tree that she had never seen. We'll leave it there.